After a 7-9 season in 2020, the Vikings, we learned a lot of things from this Viking season. Now, starting at number 1, we learned our offensive guards are worse than we thought. I mean, going into this season, we knew how bad Pat Elflein was. Pat Elflein started one game, and we saw in Drew Samia, and Vikings fans, we were excited about Drew Samia. We expected Drew Samia to be our savior. Well, Drew Samia in starting week 2, was his first start in the NFL, and he had to go against DeForest Buckner. And honestly, it could not have went worse than it did. I mean, of course he's going against DeForest Buckner. It's his first start in the NFL. You wouldn't expect a whole lot. So you give Drew Samia another chance. You give him another chance, and you give him another chance. Well, Drew Samia had possibly the worst season any of us could have expected. He was a 4th-round draft pick in 2019, and once again, Vikings just miss on every draft pick, it feels like. Not to mention, Dakota Dozier, now he wasn't drafted by the Vikings, he was drafted by the Jets, but once again, they brought Dakota Dozier back, and he could not have looked worse than he did. These Vikings offensive guards are the worst in the NFL. No Vikings offensive guard we saw look like they should be in the NFL outside of Brett Jones. Brett Jones, massive love for Brett Jones here. I mean, he is the only player, and nobody's talking about him. He's the only player who played at guard who didn't look completely awful. Even Ezra Cleveland looked bad at offensive guard, and he was a rookie 2nd-round draft pick. Now, once again, he was only a rookie, so he should be able to improve this offseason and look better next year. I'm very hopeful for Ezra Cleveland. Of course, we saw big improvement from Garrett Bradbury, and I would expect to see improvement from Ezra Cleveland, as he probably won't be a left guard or right guard next year. He'll likely be a left guard or left tackle. So I expect to see big improvement from Ezra Cleveland. But once again, these offensive guards are worse than we thought. Drew Samia had a awful 33.7 PFF grade in just 4 starts in the NFL. It could not have went worse for him. And then he was, of course, replaced by Ezra Cleveland week 6 against the Atlanta Falcons, where Drew Samia apparently was injured. Now, was he injured? I don't know. It's mostly injuries are Mike Zimmer's way of transitioning to a new guard or new offensive lineman. And we did see Ezra Cleveland come out there, did not look great against the Atlanta Falcons, and the rest of the season didn't look great, but he looked better than Dakota Dozier and Drew Samia, so there's that right there. And then meanwhile at left guard, of course, Dakota Dozier, 44.6 PFF grade, and played all 16 games. So offensive guard undoubtedly is the biggest need and should be the primary focus this offseason. And they should focus in free agency. I don't want to see a guard drafted in the first round just because of how the Vikings' track record of drafting offensive linemen in the first round, or in anywhere in the draft, really. The Vikings' track record of drafting offensive linemen, I don't want to see that happen. I would rather see possibly a 3-tech drafted, maybe a safety. Of course, drafting a safety 14th overall, you want to trade down. You don't want to take a safety 14th overall, unless if there's a prospect like Jamal Adams out there, which there isn't, so I wouldn't expect that to really happen. I would like to see the Vikings trade down if they're expecting to take a safety with their first pick, but taking a 3-tech at 14th would be great. There's the can't remember his name, guy out of Alabama. Anyways, number 2, Eric Wilson is elite. Now, we saw Anthony Barr play one game in the 2020 season. That was, of course, week 1 against the Green Bay Packers, where after that he did suffer with the injury and was placed on IR for the remainder of the season, where Eric Wilson did step in as our strong side linebacker, our outside linebacker, and he looked phenomenal. And Eric Wilson is elite. He is the future. We need to give Eric Wilson another contract. He is an unrestricted free agent this offseason and was our 2017 undrafted free agent from Cincinnati. And after replacing Anthony Barr, I would expect him to be our starting linebacker, our starting outside linebacker in 2021. Now that raises the question, what do the Vikings do with Anthony Barr? Because of course Anthony Barr is our clear starting outside linebacker because of his contract says so. His contract, we pay him like an outside linebacker. We pay him like a pass rusher. So what do the Vikings do with Anthony Barr? I would expect that they would trade away Anthony Barr, as Anthony Barr isn't old. I think he is only 28. Now, Eric Wilson, I'm pretty sure he's only like 27, so they're about the same age once again. But the Vikings, if they can find a landing spot for Anthony Barr, that would very well help the team, because we could bring back Eric Wilson, who led the team with 122 total tackles in 2020, with 3 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, 2 fumble return, 3 sacks, and 8 pass deflections. Eric Wilson and Harrison Smith were the 2 defensive players that we had in 2020. The rest of Eric Kendricks too. Okay, EK, you gotta give respect to him. Of course, he was injured the last 5 weeks of the season, but when he was out there, he made huge impact. You remember the Bears game and the Saints game where we did not have Eric Kendricks? They allowed way too many yards on the ground by David Montgomery and Alvin Kamara. If Eric Kendricks was out there, that might have changed the Vikings season. If Eric Kendricks never got injured, the Vikings might have made the playoffs. Because we know for a fact David Montgomery would not have rushed for over 100 yards against the Minnesota Vikings if Eric Kendricks was healthy. And Alvin Kamara, he probably would have rushed for over 100 yards, but once again, he would not have 5 touchdowns, or what was it, 6 rushing touchdowns against the Vikings if we had Eric Kendricks out there, who always stops those big runs. So Eric Kendricks, possibly the best inside linebacker in the NFL in both coverage and stopping the run. So if Eric Kendricks was healthy, it would be a completely different story. But once again, when he was not out there, Harrison Smith and Eric Wilson were the glue that held this Vikings defense together, and it was not very good considering they're just a safety and an outside linebacker, so they can't make massive impact as other positions would, like a lockdown cornerback. But once again, I would expect Eric Wilson to get a new contract, as Anthony Barr is expected to make $12.4 million in 2021, which is insane considering his talent. I mean, he's not the best linebacker, but once again, Vikings can cut him. He is a potential out this offseason in 2021, so Vikings could cut him, but I would expect before that they do try to find a landing spot for, or a trading spot for, Anthony Barr. So if the Vikings can move on from Anthony Barr and transition into Eric Wilson, this would be huge considering they would get all that money back and can invest that money into an offensive guard like Brendan Sheriff, like Joe Thuney, and that would be huge for the Minnesota Vikings. Number 3, our wide receiver group is still elite. Gosh, can we just appreciate the all white? Okay, this is an unpopular opinion. I love the Vikings all white uniforms more than primetime purple. But primetime purple is so good too, where they have like, I love the gold numbers, but the all white just looks so clean. Oh, I love that. That was against the Chicago Bears when they wore all white, where they won the game. But once again, our wide receiver group is still great. It is still a great, I don't remember the last time they wore all white. Anyway, okay, sorry. Our wide receiver group is still great. After trading Stephon Diggs in 2019, or no, in 2020, the Minnesota Vikings had a huge question mark at wide receiver. Before the Vikings even traded away Stephon Diggs, there was a big need at wide receiver. We needed new wide receivers, a potential wide receiver 4, because we didn't know what Chad Beebe was going to look like. We didn't even know if Irv Smith was going to be good, or Tyler Conklin, or if BC Johnson was as good as we thought, which this last 2020 season wasn't great. But once again, we had a huge need at wide receiver. Putting all of that aside, trading away Stephon Diggs, we needed new wide receivers, which they took care of. The 22nd pick, the Minnesota Vikings, with the Bills, it was the Bills' initial pick, but after trading Stephon Diggs, did acquire the 22nd pick, where they drafted Justin Jefferson out of LSU. Now, he was more than just a replacement for Stephon Diggs, as I would rather have Justin Jefferson than Stephon Diggs. Now, of course, if you're putting them side by side, Stephon Diggs had a far better season than Justin Jefferson. As great of a season as Jefferson has had, Stephon Diggs just had a better season. But once again, I would rather have Justin Jefferson, as he is cheaper. He's not much of a, oh, well, he might be. We haven't seen it yet, of course. Stephon Diggs, it took him a little bit to be more of like a brat where he wants the ball all the time. Justin Jefferson is not there yet, but once again, he is cheaper, he is younger, and I would rather have Jefferson than Stephon Diggs at this moment. And then both Jefferson and Thielen just made an amazing wide receiver duo. And then of course you had the rising star Chad Beebe, who was inside the slot, played a lot of the snaps in the slot, and was our starting punt returner. And I guess when KJ Osborne was active the first half of the season, he was not the starting punt returner, but by the end of the season, Chad Beebe was our starting punt returner, and both of them looked great. Justin Jefferson stepping out as a wide receiver 2, and then Chad Beebe stepping in as a slot wide receiver 3. And then BC Johnson, he's a pretty good backup outside wide receiver. If Thielen or Jefferson gets injured, you will see how good BC Johnson can be. Irv and Conklin are our future. Our tight end group in 2020, it showed how good it really is. Of course, we knew Kyle Rudolph was great. Now, Kyle Rudolph, he is on the steady decline. He is 30, going into his 30s, and although he is still one of the best tight ends in the NFL. Now, I would give him top 10, and that's not saying a whole lot. There isn't that many great tight ends out there, but I would still put him as a top 10 tight end when used properly. But he is an aging player, and he does cost a lot more money than these players do. But it showed when he got injured that Irv Smith Jr. and Tyler Conklin, they are our future. And the tight end duo between Irv Smith Jr. and Tyler Conklin looked better than Rudy and Irv Smith Jr. So let's take a look. So after Kyle Rudolph got injured week 12, we saw both of them step in, and they looked phenomenal. And this is, You love to see it because they're both on the rookie deals and very young players. And if the Vikings can put them both on longer deals, now, of course, Tyler Conklin, they can give him a contract extension as he was a 2018 draft pick. And then Irv Smith Jr., second-year player out of Alabama, who was a second-round draft pick, does suffered with some drop passes. Now, outside of that, he's a great route runner, great blocker. He's what you want in a tight end outside of his drop passes. He can work on that still. But once again, he did have 30 receptions for 365 yards and 5 touchdowns with a 70 PFF grade in 2020. Phenomenal seasons for Irv Smith Jr., and he looks like our best player out of the 2019 draft class. And then Tyler Conklin, 19 receptions for 194 yards and a touchdown, and he looks like our best player out of our 2018 draft class. So both of these players look very good as tight end number 1 and 2. That raises the question, what are we going to do with Kyle Rudolph? I would love to see the Vikings trade Kyle Rudolph, as he did decline a pay cut, and I would love to see this happen. But once again, he's an aging player on the decline, I don't expect the Vikings to get a whole lot, but if the Vikings can get anything out of that, use that money, just like I said again with the Anthony Barr trade. If they can use that money and just stash up on guards, this would be huge for the Vikings. It would complete our offense, as Kyle Rudolph isn't making a huge impact with the team. He's a great blocker for Dalvin Cook, I understand, and he's a great pass catcher in the red zone, but once again, he's not making a huge impact on the team, and it would be better for us to move that money to offensive guard, where it would really impact this Vikings offensive line, as there was far too many pressures allowed on the interior side of the line in 2020. So this would be huge for the Minnesota Vikings. And at number 5, Madison, he isn't as ready as we thought. Now, Alexander Mattison is coming off of a great season, a great rookie season in 2019, where he was the best Vikings rookie in 2019. And running backs is that position where they make an immediate impact in the NFL. When you look at possibly cornerbacks and quarterbacks, it takes them a while to really make biggest impacts. They're not in their prime right away. Running backs, they come out and they look great. And Alexander Mattison, he looks like a very good running back, a very good backup running back. He looks very good as a backup running back, but as a starting running back, he doesn't look good. Now, of course, Dalvin Cook, he is a top 3 running back in the NFL, no question. But with that being said, he is very injury prone. And you want your backup running back, you want Alexander Mattison to look like a starting running back. Because when Dalvin Cook goes out with an injury, as he has yet to play an entire 16 games in the NFL, when he goes out with an injury, you want to be comfortable with who is going to be starting in the backfield. And I'm not comfortable with Alexander Mattison, and we saw this after the Vikings lost Alexander Mattison in 2018. The Minnesota Vikings drafted Alexander Mattison out of Boise State in the 3rd round of the 2019 draft class, and this was to be Latavius Murray's replacement. Now, Latavius Murray was a great backup running back, because when Dalvin Cook did get injured, Latavius Murray stepped into that starting role and looked like a starting running back. I'm very happy for what Latavius Murray is doing with the New Orleans Saints. He had a great season, I think 4 touchdowns and a bunch of yards with the New Orleans Saints, and has created a great running back duo with Alvin Kamara. But with that being said, in 2 games, because Alexander Mattison started 2 games in 2020 where Dalvin Cook did miss an injury against the Atlanta Falcons, and he wasn't there week 17 because his father passed away due to COVID. But in 2 starts, Alexander Mattison, this was both against the Atlanta Falcons and the Detroit Lions, who are 2 of the worst defenses in the NFL. The Falcons are 29th against yards allowed, and the Lions are dead last in yards allowed. So these are 2 of the worst defenses in the NFL. And Mattison only had 121 rushing yards on 31 attempts and a touchdown. Now, 121 rushing yards on 31 attempts is not bad. I feel like that's averaging. I think that's almost 4 yards a carry. That's not that bad. But once again, when you look at it, he is playing the Atlanta Falcons and Detroit Lions. This is not good performances by Alexander Mattison, and he's not as ready as we thought. We see Alexander Mattison as a backup running back and creates that 1-2 punch in the backfield. We see Alexander Mattison as a backup running back look very good. We see what he can do, but there is a big difference between playing a couple snaps every drive than playing the entire drive and getting over 20 carries a game. There is a big difference. And we saw the second half of the Seattle game exactly what Mattison can do and who we want to see Alexander Mattison be as a backup running back, because we will see Alexander Mattison start another game in the NFL. We will see it happen, and it will probably be next season. I don't want to jinx anything, but Dalvin Cook, he will likely be injured again next season. We will see Alexander Mattison start, and he has to prove himself. We need to see the Alexander Mattison we saw the second half of the Seattle game. Because if not, Vikings have to keep moving on. They have to keep looking for a good backup running back. They have to keep searching, keep drafting, throwing draft stock, throwing money for a good backup running back. Because when you have a running back like Dalvin Cook, who does get injured every season, you need to be comfortable with who's going to be your backup. And if it's can't be Alexander Mattison, just move on. Honestly, Mike Boone, I love what I see from Mike Boone. I have been a huge Mike Boone fan since the 2019 preseason, and he's a very good running back 3, and he might work his way into a running back 2 in the future. And finally, what we learned, Anthony Harris was likely a one-year wonder. This is not the first time this happened in the NFL, and it won't be the last. Where offenses figure out your defense. They figure out certain defensive guys. And this is exactly what we saw with Anthony Harris, who came off of a 2019 season where he had 60 total tackles, 1 fumble return, 6 interceptions, 11 pass deflections, and a touchdown. That touchdown was a pick 6 against Russell Wilson, and he was the top-ranked safety by PFF in 2019. This happens a lot in the NFL where they figure out defenses, specifically defensive backs, like Anthony Harris or possibly an inside linebacker. They figure out exactly how to work their weaknesses. And this is what we saw with Anthony Harris, where he had a massive decline from 2019 to the 2020 season, and we needed him a lot more in 2020. This was his second year starting, where he started all 16 games, and in that recorded 104 total tackles and only 7 pass deflections, scoring a 66.2 PFF grade in 2020. And Anthony Harris, he won't be here another season with the Minnesota Vikings, as we will lose him to free agency. And honestly, I can't say I'm that disappointed, because he will likely be a one-year wonder. Now, of course, it is too soon to say, as he is a pretty young guy and he has a lot of years ahead of him to prove himself. But once again, offenses figured out how to work his weaknesses. And Anthony Harris, you hate to see it, but he's looking like he will probably be a one-year wonder with the team, as on just his second year starting, he is still in his prime. It's not like he's declining. He is still in his prime. This was his second year starting. He took a big decline and likely will be a one-year wonder. Whoever he's with, he will be a starting safety for the next few years. But as offenses have figured out Anthony Harris and how to work his weaknesses, he is likely a one-year wonder. So those are the things we learned from the Viking season. This is everything we learned. And honestly, after such a bad season, there's a lot of hope. Like, this wide receiver group and this tight end group gives us a lot of hope for our Vikings offense. In 2020, we got a glimpse of how this offense's future is going to look. When the Vikings move on from Kirk Cousins, now this is going to probably be in some years to come, we will likely still have Irv Smith Jr. and Tyler Conklin as our tight end duo and Justin Jefferson as our wide receiver 1. So we saw the potential for our future for the Vikings. So there's a lot of hope for this Vikings team. But once again, on the defensive side of the ball, I didn't talk a whole lot about defense, because did we learn a whole lot defensively from the Vikings? Now, the Vikings had the worst defensive season of the Mike Zimmer era last year, but did we learn a whole lot? I mean, with all these injuries that we suffered, did you expect that the Vikings were going to look good on defense? With all these rookies starting at cornerback and all the injuries we had, was there a whole lot that surprised us? Was there a whole lot of shockers on defense? The only defensive things that we learned from the 2020 season, maybe I guess you can put in that Afadio Denebo doesn't look like a starting defensive end, but outside of that, Eric Wilson, he looks great. Anthony Harris looks like a one-year wonder. What is outside of that? I mean, Afadio Denebo not looking like a starting defensive end, we learned that too. Not a whole lot of things we learned defensively. You expected the Vikings to have a bad defense going into the 2020 season, so they didn't disappoint, I guess. But once again, this is the things that we learned from the Vikings 2020 season. Let me know if I'm missing anything. Let me know what you all think.